Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our fourth season, we're looking at Kenneth Branagh's 2011 film, Thor. I'm Matthew Fox from theethicalpanda.com.
And I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And today we're talking about Minute 109, which begins with the credits for Compositors, Johnny Wilson, Diana Hynek, Corbin Mell, Tony Lapoy, and Rob Netterhost, and ends with the credit for Assets Assistant Danny Brown. Joining us in the show today, we have Paul Hoppe, aka ZenMadman, a poker professional, a writer, a musician, a martial artist, a person who loves having numerous titles for himself, and a frequent guest of mine on the Superhero Ethics and Star Wars Universe podcast. Thor, you're not Thor, but we're celebrating Thor. Paul,
Thor.
No comments on your ego. Happy Thor's Day. That's what I say. It's Thursday. Happy Thor's Day.
Happy Thor's Day. Thank you.
What is your favorite Thor moment of all? And it can be from, any of the movies, any of the TV shows, a comic book, a cereal box, a role-playing game of heroes you played when you were 13. What's the best Thor moment you can think of?
I went for the head. I don't know. The moment, is just so wonderfully anticlimactic. To me, actually, that moment it comes back around to what this movie kind of set up, which was you can't solve everything with your hammer. And okay, he doesn't have his hammer anymore. He's got, Stormbreaker.
Yeah, axe.
But it's all over. He decapitates Thanos. It's just irrelevant. And he's just I went for the head. And the fact that, he killed Thanos and that's his moment of defeat, kind of that symbolizes most just the loss and the failure, and that it's so flatly delivered. I mean, there's a million great Thor moments, but that one to me just kind of it doesn't put an end on his whole arc, but it puts a period on the whole development up to there.
And kind of starts his next arc, which is a very significant one as well.
Exactly.
It's the perfect payoff to the setup that we had, which we didn't even realize was a setup in the last film when Thanos tells him that, right? And so it's it's he finally did what Thanos said, and it doesn't make things better.
Exactly.
It's such an important theme, I think, this idea of all these movies that are about violence and action, and that sometimes that's not how you can solve things. And I think you're right that's what Thor was taught. In this movie, he has to learn that, going and beating up the Jotuns doesn't actually solve anything, and that it's a very different version of it, but he's still learning a version of that all the way to Endgame. So, yeah, great moment. We'll get into a lot more thoughts on Thor right after this.
You know how things have been over here with the merch. Every time we have a change in seasons, we have a change in art. So the artwork for season 4 is not going to be around much longer in our merch store. If you want to get anything with the fantastic Bifrost art that we have, head over to truestory.fm/Marvel Movie Minute and click on merch. It'll take you right to our online store. So last chance. Get in while the getting's good.
All right, so let's dive right into the credits. Today I don't have any kind of big uber questions. We're just going to talk about the credits specifically because there's a lot of interesting ones. But I need to start by asking, most of the roles that we're seeing here are, people who did a thing to make the movie happen, where you can be like, oh yeah, the stunts, the music, the lighting, et cetera, et cetera. But then right in the middle of this, we still got a number of more minutes of credits to go. There's a whole segment about the accountants and the clerks. And I guess if you're the people who control the money, maybe you've got some power and hey guys, give us some recognition. But none of the other office workers associated with this movie, the receptionists or all the people who did the office work necessary to run a movie crew are credited at all. What's going on? Why are they doing it? Or does the name mean something very different than what I think it means?
Having been an accounting clerk on a film, you're there every day, 14 hours a day, just like the rest of the crew, going through all the paperwork that everybody does, the time cards, it's constant. And it's amazing how much paperwork that you have every single day, and you're there with the rest of the crew in the production office, just doing everything, tracking down actors who, Chris Pratt was on the movie that I worked on, and he thought it was really funny to never write his actual name on his paperwork. And so somebody had to go out and track him down every time to get him to actually put his name on his stuff so that he could get paid. And so it's amazing how much work there is, but yeah, it's, they're part of the crew. They're part of the family.
Well, I thank you for that. That's not a call out to me. That's exactly what I was asking. So my view of accountants, it doesn't make sense that they're here, but that sounds very much more like what would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, they're cutting checks for, all the vendors, like art departments always coming and saying, hey, I need to get these checks cut for these people because we need to pick this stuff up today. Loading up particular departments' cards with the money that they need so they can go out and do their shopping. I mean, it's pretty constant.
Yeah, I mean, the paperwork for spending $100 million or more has to be just overwhelming. Also, I think it would have been funny if that's just didn't pay Chris Pratt.
Right? I know.
That would have been like, this is our
That's
joke.
what we kept saying. It's like, well, we don't have to pay him, do we?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's radio, so you can't see the face, but there was not much of a surprise face when you said it was Chris Pratt, who was kind of a jerk to people.
He wasn't a jerk. He was overly playful.
He was a mischievous.
He very much was, yes.
Kind of knocking over the table and not caring who has to clean it up.
Yeah, right.
That was kind of the first thing that jumped out at my mind. What else jumped out for you all watching these credits?
It's we're in kind of a very technical swath here. We've got some sound people, some art department stuff, the accounting you pointed out, and then a lot of the grip and electric department that we have coming in here, kind of just like with all the different elements that they do with all the lights and other tech that has to happen. Costumes, a big part of it for this particular film. We have a whole section on kind of like the specialty costumes that were built for this film. We talked about some of our frustrations with some of the Warriors 3 costumes, how they looked a little fake. But still, I like the design overall that they came up with all the costumes for the film. And then we start getting into the big blocks of like effects people who worked on this. But it's a nice swath of the variety of people who worked on this particular film.
Yeah, I mean, the number of names that go by in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
And just like how many people are involved with a production of this size. I think some people are like, oh, what's the best boy do? Or like, what's the key grip? And, you've got your electricians and your grips who like the gaffer is I think the head electrician. And then the best boy is like, their number one. You're my number one guy.
Exactly.
And the electricians, like there's a lot of power that needs to be run. I worked on the lighting crew at the Manhattan Center for a little while, and just like the amount of time spent setting up, like the electricians are usually the first in, last out, because nobody else is going to be there when you don't have power, right? Someone has to go in and literally turn on the lights and cable everything up and tape everything down, and then the key grip and the all of that is like setting up for the camera work and the rigging and just the amount of like physical materials and how we talked about stunts being dangerous, but like electricity is dangerous too. Heights are dangerous. So these are very, very dangerous jobs that you need a lot of skill and I'm not sure. Yeah, there's their own unions, and just the amount of work that goes into Andrew's talking about these like 12-hour, 14-hour days that are just really grueling, and you probably don't always know going in how long a particular shooting day is going to be, right? It's done when it's done, and but overtime is good too.
If I remember correctly, wasn't a big part of the union fight that we just had a couple of months ago about kind of cutting down on the ability to like just keep people working forever and like having more like rest time before have them work 14 hours and then call them back 6 hours later kind of things?
There's certainly a lot with that. Yeah, the whole IATSE union fight that they were just having, there's a lot to that. And a lot of it was also just like, if you're going to do that, then you need to pay us a lot better, and like that's a big element because, I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's great when you're getting, that triple time or whatever because you're being so overworked. But on the flip side, your body is being overworked, and it's really hard for you to kind of actually continue at that for a long time. And it's very difficult when a lot of the above the line people are like, okay, well, we're out of here. We're going to go off, and they go and hang out at the bars and do whatever they need to do. Meanwhile, everybody else is still trying to wrap up and get everything off of the set or off the location because they're moving to the next location for the next day or whatever it might be. And so it can be frustrating. So yeah, it'll be good to see a lot of changes happen just to allow for safer work all around for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the hours my mom was, she was an editor when I was a kid, and she would spend 6 months working, 14-hour days, and then she'd spend 6 months not necessarily having a gig for a while, but, she would say it would be like 2 weeks after finishing, and even as an editor, like there's a release date. So they're just like trying to get it done, and they just work 90-hour weeks until it's done. And she was like, there would be 2 weeks until I could like not feel sick, just like lying in bed basically all the time.
Well, Paul, I also have to thank you. And I don't think we shared the notes with this, but my two notes after talking about the accountants are, what is a best boy, and ask Paul about his experience in lighting. So you covered both those very well. And, I think one of the reasons why it's interesting is like titles like Best Boy seem so weird, I think, if you don't have any of the knowledge about it. And especially because it as I understand it, at least, it's very much about kind of like the history of Hollywood. I have a friend who I went out to California and had dinner with her and her husband. Her husband, I knew he was involved in the film industry, but I asked him what he did. He said, I'm a best boy, which this large gray-haired man just saying that just was a bit of a dissonance. And he could see my face. He's like, yeah, it's a stupid title, but it's just what we've called this position for 90 years. And so it's what we call it. Right. And I just there's a part of me that's like, how... I have to imagine women have been in that role. I have to imagine other adults are just like, I'm not a boy. Like I guess it's just kind of like this is what we always do. But it's very funny to me that the name of that position has not been changed over all these years.
Well, and I think that, they've clearly had fun within the industry with that. Because if you, go back to like the Naked Gun or the Airplane credits, things like that, where they would have like, Dolly grip, Poligrip, what the hell is a grip? Like in the credits, just like all this silly nonsense. I mean, it's fun that they play around with that and allow for that to be, something that can be poked fun at a little bit.
I think the term best boy, I was looking up the etymology a little bit this morning, and I think it possibly came from like a seafaring term originally.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it sounds like a cabin boy and like first mate's boy and stuff are definitely like old English sailing terms. So, and
I mean, rigging is a thing on sailboats.
Yeah, right.
The tape that often you use to like hold down wires and stuff like that is referred to as gaffer's tape. Often, and duct tape being a specific kind of that. I'm probably getting the exact details of that wrong, but you get the general idea.
Well, there's a strong similarity between duct tape and different types of gaffer's tape. But the joke on film sets is always that, you just don't call it duct tape because then they can charge 5 times as much for it, and it's like, they use clothespins all the time, but they call them C-47s. And it's because now we can charge more to sell them. And it's just, it's a whole joke.
I also have to imagine that someone would draw the line about being listed in the credits as the head ductor. So, head gaffer is
head ductor.
A little better.
There was one name that I wanted to call out. And speaking of best boys, it was for best boy rigging electrician. And the name is Cricket Sloat. And the reason that I wanted to call Cricket Sloat out is because the name caught my eye. And I'm like, that was in the Iron Man credits too. And sure enough, Cricket also was involved in Iron Man. So it's funny how some of these people, like, it's just a name like Cricket ends up being a name that you're able to very easily remember.
Yeah, well, and even there, like, I was saying, like, certainly some best boys had to have not been male. Cricket is a woman. So yeah, just kind of but that's the title.
Right.
Yeah, so Paul, what other kind of credits stood out for you or other things you noticed in watching this minute?
I mean, the accountant stood out to me, and I'm glad that we got some insight into that.
I saw your face while I was saying that.
Yeah, I was like, I know what you're going to bring up now, But yeah, I was also imagining like that can't be easy,
yeah.
and of course, the electric and all that, the costumers and set dressers, and that we only barely got into the effects, and there's so many illustrators as well, and it's like you don't think, and it's like, oh well, yeah, I mean, somebody drew all those drawings in the notebooks, right? And it's like they draw storyboards, and there's just so much that goes into everything.
Yeah. And a lot of that work is work that you just don't even see on the screen. It's all sorts of back end work that they use in the pre-production phase.
Oh yeah,
to figure out what they're going to do, but once they have the cameras on set and ready to go.
Right. You don't want to get there with a crew of 100 people that you're going to be paying time and a half for half the day at the end of the day, and not be very efficient in what you're doing on set.
I know one of the names you highlighted was lead storyboard artist Federico de Alessandro. I can't draw a stick figure. I'm horrific at art. And the idea that there's a person who draws out with color every scene in the movie, or at least a lot of them, it just baffles me. That's so much artistic creation that, yeah, it's all pre-production. It's nothing to do with what you see on screen, but how much work that has to be, and how much talent you have to be able to, come up with a vision that the director is able to be like, yeah, that's what I want. And then everyone else can look at it and go, okay, I see that drawing. I don't know what we're trying to create here. And
oftentimes it's doing it over and over again for different departments, trying to figure out how is this actually going to look? How are we going to create this observatory? And working with the different departments to try to figure out, oh, okay, so if we do it like this big sphere, and so, I mean, yeah, it's just an amazing amount of work that goes into sorting all this stuff out, and then figuring out how you're going to film in it. Where are the walls that you can pull out so that you can get the cameras in? I mean, it's this constant things. And nowadays with the world of effects, it's what are we actually going to build? What are we going to give to the visual effects department so that they can create the rest of the set, et cetera, et cetera. And I know Bo Welch and everybody in this film celebrated so much how they created such elaborate sets. And so there were some very big sets that they created for this film. But I mean, still, Asgard's a pretty big place, and they did a lot in Puente Antiguo too. So I mean, they still did a lot of work to digitally to add on to everything.
I loved. We talked before about all that swirling shot through the cosmos at the beginning of the credits. I don't know if that's the kind of thing we could storyboard, but I'd love to see what the storyboards for that were. How did someone conceive of this? Because it's very esoteric and ethereal and subtle. That it's not here's a planet, there's a planet. So. Yeah, it's fascinating.
I really, part of me wishes that we could see a little Loki at one point, just kind of falling through it.
That would be good.
Yeah, I hear that.
Still screaming.
And it ends with the assets assistant, Danny Brown. Now, in that case, Andy, my first thought with assets means that it's props, the physical assets on a set. But then I also wonder if maybe assets is about the monetary assets that's connected to the clerk stuff. Do you know what what that person is?
Well, I my best guess, because the credit comes right after the some of the publicity credits for unit publicist and still photographer. My guess is that they're dealing with all of the assets for just all of the elements that they're going to be building and keeping from the set for the marketing department to then pull so that they can start.
I see.
That's my best guess. I'm not exactly sure, but it's purely based on the position with those other credits.
And I think photos taken on set are referred to as assets as well.
Oh, he's figuring out what photos are going to go to news magazine, different publicity magazines. The cynical part of me says this person maybe decide which photos are going to be leaked accidentally. That's a whole other story. All right. Well, any other last things about this minute that we want to get into?
I think that's it.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, Paul. So we talked about a bunch of different stuff. Is there any other kind of content you're creating out there that we haven't got a chance to tell listeners about?
Probably. I don't know. Not really. I don't know. I mean, we're doing a bunch of Batmans, which probably will have been done, right, by the time that this comes out. So we will either have liked or not liked the new Batman movie. And we're doing some Boba Fett, which, speaking of storyboarding, I really enjoy how they use their storyboards at the end of their credits.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really nice way of both honoring that work, but also of like just because at first I didn't even realize that. I was just like, oh, it's some drawings. Oh no, wait, these are the storyboards. Like,
they kind of did in The Mandalorian too. So it's nice seeing that they kind of created that for some of these TV shows that they're doing. I like that quite a bit.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you both so much as always. All the ways you can find Paul, we've talked about, you can find in the show notes. My stuff is all on theethicalpanda.com. Andy Nelson is part of the Next Reel family of podcasts, one of the founders of the Next Reel, and you can find so many different great film podcasts there. So please check all those out. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good day.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is One Last Ride by Martin Puringer. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.